Good evening. Dobry wieczór in Ukrainian. Imagine the Soviet school and imagine the meeting of a principal who stands in front of the children. And he says, "Dear children, the Soviet Union has the best schools in the world. The Soviet Union has the best books in the world. The Soviet Union has the best toys in the world." Then he looks and says, "Hey, little Mary, why are you crying?" And she says, "I want to live in the Soviet Union." I was born in the Soviet Union. My grandfather was murdered in 1943 by the communists because he was a Christian educator. My uncle was hanged by the KGB because he refused to cooperate with them. Part of my family were deported, like many Germans were, into Kazakhstan, and they finished their life near Karaganda. Business of my family was destroyed. They became poor people from wealthy, prosperous family. But there was something they could not take away. I was born in winter, cold Ukrainian winter. And I was baptized at home. It was not because snowbanks, for which Pastor Dr. Ram likes to joke when he comes to Ukraine, were high. It was not because roads were icy and people could not walk. It was because if they spot you at church, if you come there with a child, especially if you work at school, then you will have problems. You'll be fired, or maybe your child will be taken away from you. So my parents invited a pastor to come home and baptize me. When I hear about the Soviet Union, and especially now when I hear this nostalgia, how people weep about it, I always amazed. You cannot go to church. You cannot worship your Lord freely. You cannot have your business. You cannot witness about Christ. You don't have basic your freedoms, freedom of religion and freedom of speech. Communists were always afraid of truth. Like their modern followers, they are afraid of the truth. And that truth we have in the Bible, in the Word of God. How do you raise your children when you have no Bible? When I remember my childhood, one of my biggest desires was to have the Word of God. My father on my mother's side, thanks be to God, was not killed. He was the president of the church. He had his Bible. When I was a small boy, I would take my big, thick, red notebook, come to his home, and try to copy verse by verse, line by line of the Bible. In such a way, you have your own small version of the Bible. You can't have it all, but that is something, the most precious verses. In the same manner, the second notebook would be dedicated to the prayers. If you would like to worship, if you would like to go to a church and attend the Holy Communion, you will need to go to a place about 50, 60, 70 kilometers away from your home, because otherwise you have again a problem. Otherwise you have persecution. Otherwise you have always a danger that either you or your relatives will finish their life someplace in Karaganda, or you will finish your life or start your life in the orphanage. This was life in the Soviet Union. This was life in my family. Life that you always hide. Life that you always treasure what you have. And life that you worship the Lord, whom they cannot take away from you. Because He came, and He came to save us. And He gave His life for us on the cross. And He rose so that we would live forever, in spite of all the attempts of the Satan and his servants to take this treasure away from us. You know, my dream was always to have the Bible. When I was about 20, finally my dream was fulfilled. I came to visit my brother who was an engineer in a city, And he told me, Slavik, you want to have the Bible? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, here I have a guy. He came from Poland. Poland is our neighbor in the West. And he is a Bible smuggler. I came to him and said, do you really smuggle the Bibles? He looked at me, frowned, said, who told you that? I said, my brother did. I said, okay. Well, I have only one copy. I am a professor of English, he said, in Warsaw. I have my own King James version. He said, 10 rubles, and it's yours. I was a student, I didn't have much money. It was 1/4 of my monthly salary. I gave him willingly this 10 rubles and took my King James version and began to read it. And immediately, in the same evening. And I decided to stay overnight with my brother. As we stayed, his wife laid the table for supper, and I realized that this smuggler from Poland doesn't leave a house. And I asked him, why are you standing here? He said, oh, this lady who is laying the table, she's my niece. And I said, and you sold me the Bible? I am her brother-in-law. He said, well, I have to make my living somehow. But, I was willing to pay 100 rubles. But this is such a treasure, such a huge, great thing to have in your hands, the Word of God. How precious it was. Soon I married. I was coming home and I was reading the Bible, translating that from English into Ukrainian, because I speak Ukrainian, and my wife, as my wife does, into Ukrainian. That's how she became a believer. Because the faith comes from hearing. That was why the Soviets were so much afraid of the Bible and of the word of truth. But the Lutheran Church in Ukraine was destroyed. In 1944, when the communists came to Ukraine, Lutheran pastors were shot dead. Those were lucky who ran away to the West. Deacons were sent into concentration camps. Churches were closed. And you don't have pure doctrine. The only churches that were allowed, that were functioning, were Russian Orthodox churches. And there is no truth there. They don't preach the gospel. They don't administer the sacraments faithfully. How blessed I was one day when I was already a teacher, a lecturer at the university. And I came across when the Soviet Union collapsed, I met Lutheran missionaries. And they gave me one little book, very small, tiny book. And I took it home and I read it and I realized this is my faith. This is what I believe. Because this is exactly what the Bible tells. And that was Luther's small catechism. I had so much joy that, out of sudden, you have a very clear picture of everything. I began to share with my wife. I began to share this with my students who would stay after classes, after lectures. And we would talk about Christianity and about joy found in the gospel and explained so well by Dr. Luther. It finished so that I took my students and we found another missionary, Lutheran missionary, who was in Chernobyl, where I lived. And in such a way we founded the first Lutheran congregation in the Western Ukraine. And the Lutheranism was restored. And then I was invited to come in 1994 to study at St. Louis at a seminar. And I found this Latvian guys. There was Andris Mudris, and he was speaking a small catechism and other books, and I asked, Andris, where do you take them? Oh, he said, there is this great pastor, Bob Run, and he does this excellent job here. I said, could we meet him? Could we do our work somehow? We need these things in Ukrainian. I said, I have my copy in English, but we don't have it in Ukrainian. And I said, yeah, we could meet him. And then we had that meeting in St. Louis. I still remember it. I remember the Pastor Alton, when we spoke only German at his home. I remember that excellent meeting when Pastor said, well, you translate small catechism and you translate good news about Jesus. and let's publish it and let's see how it goes. And that was one of our first editions that we made. Luther's Small Catechism. It was immediately sent around the churches. And it made miracles. We really often forget about treasure that we have in our confessions and about the power of the printed word. One of the books came to the hands of a young Baptist pastor in the eastern Ukraine. And he called us and he said, well, I have this excellent book. Do you know, this is what you believe, this is what you teach? He said, yes. So can I come and talk to you? He came and said, well, do you have a big explanation of this book, Luther's Small Catechism? And at that time we published Taylor's explanation of Small Catechism. And then in about 2 months, he called and said, well, our congregation, when read it, we believe that this is the very true explanation of the scriptures. That's absolutely sound doctrine. Can we join the Lutheran Church? That's how things work. I said, of course, come. We'll accept you. And now he's one of the most active pastors in our church. He's so active also in other areas, bring other people and his friends into the Lutheran fellowship. There is a blessing to have these books. There are so many books in the world. I think Dr. Luther said it doesn't matter how many books you read, it matters what kind of books you read. And the Lutheran Heritage Foundation gives us the best books possible. The best books. The books that bring the pure gospel. The books that bring people to Christ. I cannot really find words to express my gratitude to Pastor Ram, to all the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, to Pastor Heise, to Pastor Otto, to all of you, to Jeff, who do this great service to churches all around the world. We published recently the Bible in pictures. And one of my friends, Bishop Horpynchuk from Odessa, has called me and said, well, can you give us 1,000 books? 1,000 Bibles. I said, sorry, we have only 160. So call me maybe next year. Maybe we'll have more. He said, well, we have so many children, orphanages, other people, and that's such an excellent book. They need it. And when I look at these small children that take these Bibles, when I look at young men who take theology books, I always remember my childhood and my dream to have the Bible in my own hands. To have a good theology book and read about the Lord, to understand the Word of God, to know the Lord as Dr. Luther knew. I don't think anyone knew him as well as Luther knew. And I think, what a blessing we have now in Ukraine. What a blessing. But still, we're not a quiet place in Ukraine. We have a war. Russia annexed the Crimea from Ukraine. Every day we have news from the front that, that soldier or that soldier killed. We have our soldiers in the front whom we pray daily. We had a boy whom we lost in the church, in the Eastern Front. But the word is, we have the Bible. We have the confessions. And the Lord comforts. And the Lord gives promise. And the Lord gives hope. And the Word of God creates faith. And the books that the Lutheran Heritage Foundation provides, they sustain our doctrine. They train our pastors who go and comfort our people in these most difficult times. I would like to thank you, everyone who are here, for your support of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation. I'd like to thank you for your hard work that you do to make sure that such books come to Ukraine, come to Latvia, come to Russia, come to other places. And I thank the Lord for His grace that He pours so richly on us through His Son, Jesus Christ, by faith in whom we have life eternal. And that no communist, no tyrant will ever be able to take away from us, whatever happens. Thanks be to God. Thank you very much. I would like also to give this cross from the Ukrainian Lutheran Church to the founder. You know, Pastor Ron was helped me so many times in my life. He encouraged me to stay faithful, never bend, because he knows our trials that we were coming through as the church body, as pastors, under those circumstances. He was our teacher. And please accept this with thankfulness from me and everyone.